Mirroring behavior. Mirroring behavior involves subtly imitating another person's actions, speech, or emotions to build rapport and trust. By matching their gestures, tone, or pace of speaking, you create an unconscious sense of familiarity, making them feel more connected to you. This technique works because humans are naturally drawn to those who resemble them, fostering comfort and understanding. For example, if someone leans forward during a conversation, mirroring this movement can enhance engagement. When done subtly, it feels natural and enhances communication, but overt imitation risks appearing insincere. Effective mirroring strengthens relationships and encourages cooperation. Forced agreement. Forced agreement is a psychological tactic that leverages small initial commitments to secure larger ones. By asking questions or making requests that are easy to agree with, such as, "Do you value honesty?" or "Would you like to save money?" you create a pattern of compliance. Once someone says yes repeatedly, they feel subtly obligated to maintain consistency, making them more likely to agree to subsequent, more significant requests. This technique exploits the human desire to appear reliable and trustworthy, both to themselves and others. While effective in persuasion, it can feel manipulative if used insincerely or excessively, as it relies on guiding behavior through psychological patterns rather than fostering genuine consent. The foot in the door technique. The foot in the door technique is a persuasion strategy that starts with a small, easy request to encourage compliance with a larger one later. By agreeing to the initial request, individuals begin to see themselves as cooperative or helpful, making them more likely to say yes again to maintain consistency. For example, someone might first ask you to sign a petition, then later request a donation to the same cause. This method works because people prefer their actions to align with their self-image. While effective in marketing and social influence, it can feel manipulative if overused, as it subtly guides behavior without explicit awareness. Understanding this tactic helps individuals recognize its application in everyday interactions. Labeling. Labeling is a psychological technique that involves assigning a positive or negative trait to someone, influencing their behavior to align with that label. When someone is labeled as helpful, responsible, or creative, they are more likely to act in ways that confirm the assigned identity, as people naturally strive to live up to expectations. This works because labels tap into self-perception and social validation. For example, calling a child smart may motivate them to work harder in school to embody that trait. Conversely, negative labels like lazy can reinforce undesirable behaviors by creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. While labeling can inspire growth, it must be used thoughtfully, as misplaced or overly critical labels may harm self-esteem and relationships. Reciprocity Rule. The Reciprocity Rule is a powerful social norm that compels individuals to return favors or kindnesses they have received. When someone gives you something, whether it's a gift, compliment, or assistance, you feel an innate obligation to reciprocate, often in equal or greater measure. This principle stems from the human desire to maintain balance in relationships and avoid feelings of indebtedness. For example, if a colleague helps you with a project, you're more likely to assist them in the future. Marketers often exploit this rule by offering free samples or discounts, knowing customers may feel compelled to make a purchase in return. While reciprocity fosters trust and cooperation, it can also be manipulated for personal gain, making it essential to recognize when it's being used strategically. Eye contact during disagreement. Maintaining eye contact during a disagreement can be a potent psychological tool, as it conveys confidence and assertiveness while unsettling the other person. Prolonged eye contact creates an unspoken challenge, making it harder for the opposing party to dismiss your perspective or avoid accountability. It signals that you are fully engaged and unwavering in your stance, which can disrupt their composure and force them to rethink their position. However, this tactic must be used carefully. Excessive or intense staring can come across as aggressive or intimidating, potentially escalating tension rather than resolving it. When done respectfully, steady eye contact fosters transparency and demonstrates sincerity, encouraging more honest and productive dialogue. Understanding its impact helps in navigating conflicts effectively. Name dropping. Name dropping involves casually mentioning influential or well-known individuals to enhance credibility, build rapport, or gain social leverage. By associating yourself with respected figures, you create an impression of importance or trustworthiness, subtly influencing how others perceive you. For instance, referencing a celebrity, expert, or mutual acquaintance in conversation can make your arguments seem more valid or your connections more impressive. However, this tactic can backfire if perceived as insincere or overly self-serving, leading to distrust or irritation. The key lies in subtlety, dropping names naturally within context rather than forcing them into unrelated discussions. When used strategically, name-dropping can open doors, establish common ground, or strengthen persuasion. Yet, relying too heavily on it risks overshadowing genuine interactions and undermining authenticity in relationships. Silent treatment. The silent treatment is a psychological tactic where one person deliberately ignores or excludes another, withholding communication to create feelings of anxiety, guilt, or insecurity. By refusing to engage, the initiator exploits the innate human need for connection and validation, leaving the recipient questioning their actions or worth. This method can be particularly unsettling because it removes the opportunity for dialogue, leaving unresolved tension hanging in the air. While some may use it as a form of passive punishment or control, it often damages relationships by fostering resentment and mistrust. The recipient may feel powerless, unsure how to restore balance. Though the silent treatment can manipulate behavior in the short term, its long-term effects are corrosive, eroding emotional intimacy and mutual respect. False deadlines. False deadlines are a manipulative tactic used to create a sense of urgency, pressuring individuals to make quick decisions or take immediate action. By imposing an artificial time constraint, the person imposing the deadline aims to limit deliberation and increase compliance. For example, a salesperson might claim a discount is available only for today to encourage an on-the-spot purchase. This strategy exploits the fear of missing out, FOMO, and disrupts rational decision-making by prioritizing speed over careful consideration. While false deadlines can be effective in driving action, they often undermine trust if the recipient discovers the timeline was fabricated. Overuse of this tactic can lead to skepticism and resistance, as people may feel coerced or manipulated rather than genuinely persuaded. Gaslighting Lite. Gaslighting Lite is a subtler form of manipulation where someone questions another person's memory, perception, or reality without outright denial. For instance, they might say, "Are you sure that's what happened?" or "You're overthinking things," planting seeds of doubt about the victim's reliability. Unlike full-blown gaslighting, this milder version operates on a smaller scale but still aims to destabilize confidence and self-trust. Over time, it can make the recipient second-guess their judgment, leading to confusion and emotional imbalance. While less aggressive than overt gaslighting, it remains insidious because it erodes mental clarity and fosters dependency on the manipulator for validation. Recognizing these tactics early helps prevent deeper psychological harm and empowers individuals to assert their reality confidently. Bait and switch. Bait and switch is a deceptive tactic where an attractive offer or promise is used to lure someone in, only to replace it with something less desirable once they're committed. For example, a retailer might advertise a product at an incredibly low price but claim it's out of stock when the customer arrives, steering them toward a more expensive alternative. This method exploits initial excitement or trust, manipulating expectations for personal gain. While commonly seen in marketing, it can also occur in interpersonal relationships, such as promising support only to withdraw it later. The bait and switch undermines trust and leaves the recipient feeling misled or manipulated. Recognizing this pattern helps individuals remain cautious and avoid falling prey to such tactics. Love bombing. Love bombing is an intense and overwhelming display of affection, attention, or admiration designed to quickly build emotional attachment and dependency. The person showering these gestures often inundates their target with compliments, gifts, or constant communication, creating a sense of being cherished and valued. However, this tactic is frequently used as a form of manipulation, aiming to establish control or gain trust rapidly. Once the recipient becomes emotionally invested, the love bomber may shift to more controlling behaviors, leaving the victim confused and vulnerable. While it can initially feel flattering, love bombing often masks ulterior motives, such as exploitation or emotional dominance. Recognizing this pattern early is crucial to maintaining healthy boundaries and avoiding potential harm. Triangulation. Triangulation is a manipulative tactic where a third party is brought into a conflict or relationship to create tension, competition, or control. By involving someone else, the manipulator shifts dynamics, often pitting two individuals against each other while positioning themselves as the central figure. For example, a person might share exaggerated or fabricated information about one party with another, fostering mistrust or jealousy. This strategy destabilizes direct communication and undermines trust, making it easier for the manipulator to assert dominance or avoid accountability. Triangulation can occur in personal relationships, workplaces, or social circles, leaving those involved feeling confused or isolated. Recognizing this behavior helps prevent emotional manipulation and fosters healthier, more transparent interactions. Playing dumb. Playing dumb involves pretending not to understand or know something to manipulate a situation or avoid responsibility. By feigning ignorance, the person shifts the burden of explanation or problem solving onto others, often to gain an advantage or evade blame. For example, someone might claim they forgot a task or act confused about instructions to delay action or test another's patience. While it can serve as a tactic to buy time or deflect accountability, playing dumb risks damaging credibility and trust if overused. It may also frustrate those on the receiving end, who feel compelled to simplify or repeat themselves unnecessarily. Though occasionally employed humorously or strategically, this behavior can undermine genuine communication and collaboration when used insincerely. Feigned vulnerability. Feigned vulnerability involves pretending to be weaker, more fragile, or in need of help than one truly is, often to elicit sympathy, support, or leniency. By presenting oneself as a victim or in distress, the person manipulates others into lowering their guard or offering assistance. For instance, someone might exaggerate hardships or express self-doubt to gain attention, favors, or forgiveness. While genuine vulnerability fosters connection, feigned vulnerability exploits empathy for personal gain, potentially straining relationships when the truth emerges. This tactic can also create an imbalance of power, as the recipient may feel obligated to provide unwarranted support. Recognizing this behavior helps prevent emotional exploitation while encouraging authentic and reciprocal interactions. Reverse psychology. Reverse psychology is a persuasive technique where someone encourages the opposite of what they truly desire, knowing it will lead the other person to do exactly what they want. For example, telling a stubborn child, "I bet you can't finish your homework," might motivate them to prove otherwise. This method leverages natural defiance or contrarian tendencies, especially in those who resist direct instructions. While effective in certain situations, reverse psychology can backfire if the individual sees through the tactic or feels manipulated. Overuse may also erode trust and create confusion in relationships. Though it can be a useful tool for influencing behavior, it requires subtlety and an understanding of the other person's mindset to avoid unintended consequences. Projection. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism where an individual attributes their own unwanted thoughts, feelings, or behaviors to someone else. For example, a person who struggles with dishonesty might accuse others of lying, deflecting attention from their actions. This tactic serves as a way to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about oneself while shifting blame onto others. In relationships, projection can create misunderstandings and conflict, as the accused party may feel unfairly targeted or misunderstood. Over time, it erodes trust and communication, making resolution difficult. Recognizing projection requires self-awareness and emotional honesty, as it often stems from internal insecurities or unresolved issues. Addressing these root causes fosters healthier interactions and more authentic connections. Withholding information. Withholding information is a manipulative tactic where key details are intentionally concealed to maintain control or influence over a situation. By keeping others in the dark, the person withholds power, forcing them to rely on incomplete or misleading data to make decisions. For instance, a manager might omit crucial facts about a project to ensure dependence on their guidance. This creates imbalance and mistrust, as those affected may feel deceived or undervalued when the truth eventually surfaces. While withholding information can temporarily serve strategic purposes, it often damages relationships and undermines collaboration. Transparency fosters trust, and recognizing this behavior helps individuals advocate for open communication and equitable interactions in personal or professional settings. Creating scarcity. Creating scarcity is a psychological tactic that involves making something appear rare or in limited supply to increase its perceived value and urgency. By suggesting that an opportunity, product, or resource is scarce, individuals are more likely to act quickly out of fear of missing out, FOMO. For instance, phrases like limited stock or exclusive offer trigger a sense of urgency, pushing people to make impulsive decisions. This method exploits the natural human tendency to prioritize what seems hard to obtain. While scarcity can drive action, it often leads to regret or dissatisfaction if the perceived value doesn't match reality. Overusing this tactic risks eroding trust, as people may feel manipulated rather than genuinely persuaded when the scarcity is artificially fabricated. Isolation tactics. Isolation tactics involve deliberately cutting someone off from their support systems, such as friends, family, or colleagues, to make them more dependent on the manipulator. This can be achieved by spreading distrust, creating conflicts, or monopolizing the individual's time and attention. For example, a controlling partner might criticize their significant other's friends, discouraging contact until the victim becomes emotionally reliant on them alone. Isolation weakens the individual's sense of autonomy and self-worth, making them easier to influence or dominate. Over time, this tactic fosters feelings of loneliness and helplessness, leaving the victim vulnerable to further manipulation. Recognizing isolation tactics is crucial for maintaining healthy relationships and seeking support when needed. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is a manipulative tactic where someone induces feelings of guilt or obligation in another person to influence their behavior. This often involves reminding them of past favors, sacrifices, or mistakes to elicit compliance. For instance, a parent might say, "After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me," to pressure their child into meeting expectations. While guilt can motivate actions, it often stems from emotional manipulation rather than genuine desire. Over time, this tactic breeds resentment and damages relationships, as the recipient feels coerced rather than respected. Healthy communication focuses on mutual understanding, not exploiting emotions. Recognizing guilt tripping helps individuals set boundaries and foster authentic, guilt-free interactions. Shaming. Shaming is a manipulative tactic that involves publicly or privately humiliating someone to enforce conformity or compliance. By attacking their character, choices, or appearance, the shamer seeks to make the individual feel small, inadequate, or guilty. For example, mocking someone for their failure or calling out their behavior in front of others can create intense emotional distress. While shame might compel someone to change their actions, it often leads to resentment, withdrawal, or damaged self-esteem. Unlike constructive criticism, shaming focuses on belittling rather than encouraging growth. This tactic erodes trust and creates fear, stifling open communication. Recognizing shaming helps individuals resist manipulation and promote healthier, more respectful interactions in relationships and communities. Emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail is a manipulative tactic where someone uses fear, obligation, or guilt to control another person's actions. This often involves threats of self-harm, withdrawal of affection, or exposure of secrets to coerce compliance. For example, a person might say, "If you leave, I'll hurt myself," creating a sense of responsibility for their well-being. Emotional blackmail exploits the victim's desire to avoid conflict or maintain harmony, leaving them trapped in a cycle of appeasement. Over time, this erodes autonomy and fosters resentment, as decisions are made out of fear rather than genuine choice. Recognizing emotional blackmail is crucial for setting boundaries and fostering relationships built on mutual respect rather than manipulation or coercion. Victimhood play. Victimhood play involves portraying oneself as the victim in a situation to gain sympathy, avoid accountability, or manipulate others. By exaggerating hardships or blaming others for their circumstances, the individual seeks to elicit compassion and deflect criticism. For example, someone might say, "I'm always the one who gets blamed, no matter what I do," to avoid taking responsibility. While this tactic can temporarily shield them from consequences, it often strains relationships by shifting focus away from genuine issues. Over time, others may grow frustrated or skeptical, recognizing the pattern as self-serving rather than authentic. Addressing victimhood play requires encouraging accountability and fostering honest communication to move beyond manipulation and build trust. Fear mongering. Fear mongering is a manipulative tactic that involves exaggerating or fabricating threats to provoke anxiety and compliance. By amplifying dangers, real or imagined, the instigator seeks to control behavior or decisions. For instance, claiming, "You'll never succeed if you don't follow this plan," creates unnecessary panic and pressure. This strategy exploits people's natural aversion to risk, pushing them to act out of fear rather than rational thought. While fear-mongering can drive quick action, it often leads to poor decisions and erodes trust when the exaggerated threats fail to materialize. Over time, this tactic fosters anxiety and dependency, leaving individuals vulnerable to further manipulation. Recognizing fear-mongering helps promote calm, informed decision-making. Flattery before criticism. Flattery before criticism is a tactic where someone offers excessive praise or compliments to soften the impact of negative feedback. For example, saying, "You're so talented, but this part could use improvement," aims to make the critique feel less harsh. While this approach can create a more receptive atmosphere, it often comes across as insincere if the flattery feels exaggerated or forced. The recipient may sense manipulation, undermining trust and the effectiveness of the feedback. Genuine communication focuses on constructive criticism without relying on superficial praise to mask negativity. Overusing this tactic risks diluting authenticity and fostering skepticism, making it essential to balance honesty with empathy for meaningful dialogue. Triggering trauma. Triggering trauma involves deliberately or carelessly bringing up painful memories or experiences to destabilize someone emotionally. This tactic can be used to manipulate, control, or punish by exploiting a person's past vulnerabilities. For instance, mentioning a sensitive event or loss in a heated argument can provoke intense emotional reactions, leaving the individual feeling overwhelmed and defenseless. While sometimes unintentional, triggering trauma is often a calculated move to gain dominance in a situation. Regardless of intent, it inflicts harm and erodes trust, making the victim feel unsafe and disrespected. Recognizing and avoiding this behavior is crucial for fostering empathy and creating safe spaces for healing and open communication. Over-apologizing. Over-apologizing involves repeatedly expressing regret or remorse, often for minor or non-existent offenses, to appear harmless or avoid confrontation. While it may seem like a gesture of humility, excessive apologizing can undermine one's credibility and assertiveness. For example, constantly saying "I'm sorry for things beyond your control" signals insecurity and invites others to take advantage of perceived weakness. Over time, this behavior creates an imbalance in relationships, as it shifts the focus away from meaningful accountability. Genuine apologies are important, but over-apologizing dilutes their impact and can make others question your confidence or intentions. Striking a balance between owning mistakes and standing firm is key to fostering respect and authentic communication. Scapegoating. Scapegoating is the act of blaming an individual or group for problems they did not cause, often to deflect attention from the real issues or perpetrators. This tactic shifts responsibility onto a vulnerable target, fostering division and justifying mistreatment. For example, a manager might blame an employee for a team failure to avoid accountability. Scapegoating exploits existing biases or inequalities, creating a culture of blame that damages trust and morale. The victim often feels isolated and unfairly targeted, while others may remain complicit out of fear or ignorance. Over time, this behavior perpetuates conflict and prevents meaningful resolution. Recognizing scapegoating helps promote fairness and encourages addressing root causes rather than assigning undue fault. Passive aggression. Passive aggression is an indirect expression of hostility or frustration, often disguised as sarcasm, backhanded compliments, or deliberate procrastination. For example, saying "sure, do whatever you want" with a dismissive tone conveys disapproval without directly addressing the issue. This behavior allows the individual to express negativity while avoiding confrontation, leaving the recipient confused or hurt. Over time, passive aggression erodes trust and creates tension in relationships, as unresolved conflicts simmer beneath the surface. It often stems from fear of direct communication or a desire to avoid accountability. Addressing passive aggression requires fostering open dialogue and encouraging honest, respectful exchanges to resolve underlying issues constructively. Recognizing it helps prevent emotional manipulation and promotes healthier interactions. False confession. Admitting to a minor wrongdoing can serve as a smokescreen to conceal a larger issue. By owning up to something small, the individual redirects focus and scrutiny away from more significant transgressions. For example, confessing to a trivial mistake at work might prevent others from investigating deeper problems they are responsible for. While it creates an illusion of honesty, this tactic manipulates perceptions and avoids accountability for the real offense. Though effective in deflecting attention, false confessions risk eroding trust if discovered, as they reveal a calculated effort to deceive rather than genuinely address concerns. Planting evidence. Subtly leaving clues or fabricating information can mislead others about intentions or actions. This tactic is often used to create doubt, shift blame, or manipulate perceptions. For instance, placing an incriminating item near someone else's belongings can falsely implicate them in wrongdoing. Planting evidence exploits trust and plays on people's assumptions, making it a powerful yet unethical tool. When uncovered, it damages credibility and relationships, as it reveals deliberate deception designed to harm or control others for personal gain. Changing the subject. Diverting attention away from sensitive or uncomfortable topics allows individuals to evade accountability or confrontation. By steering conversations toward unrelated issues, they avoid addressing the matter at hand. For example, during an argument, someone might bring up past grievances to distract from their current behavior. While this tactic temporarily shifts focus, it often frustrates those seeking resolution and prevents meaningful dialogue. Over time, repeatedly changing the subject undermines trust and signals an unwillingness to engage honestly with difficult discussions. Lying by omission. Leaving out critical details distorts understanding and skews perceptions without outright falsehoods. This subtle form of deception involves withholding key facts that would paint a clearer picture of reality. For instance, failing to mention a deadline extension when discussing workload pressures could make someone appear less competent than they are. Lying by omission exploits gaps in knowledge, allowing the manipulator to shape narratives to their advantage. However, it risks damaging relationships when the truth eventually surfaces, as it reveals intentional efforts to mislead through silence. Fake empathy. Pretending to care deeply about someone's emotions or struggles serves as a tool for manipulation. By feigning concern, the individual gains emotional leverage over the other person, who may lower their guard or become more compliant. For example, expressing sympathy after learning about someone's hardship only to exploit it later fosters mistrust. Fake empathy relies on superficial gestures rather than genuine compassion, leaving victims feeling used or betrayed once the true motive becomes clear. Authentic connections require sincerity, making fake empathy a harmful and isolating tactic. Double standards. Applying rules inconsistently based on convenience or self-interest undermines fairness and breeds resentment. For instance, holding others accountable for mistakes while excusing similar errors in oneself creates imbalance and distrust. Double standards allow manipulators to maintain power or avoid consequences, but they erode respect over time. People recognize hypocrisy when exposed, leading to fractured relationships and diminished authority. Consistency and equity are essential for fostering trust, making double standards a divisive and counterproductive approach in personal and professional settings alike. Ambiguity. Speaking vaguely or leaving statements open to interpretation helps individuals avoid accountability and responsibility. Ambiguous language provides plausible deniability, as it allows the speaker to redefine their words later. For example, promising to consider a request offers no concrete commitment, enabling the individual to sidestep obligations. While ambiguity can protect against immediate demands, it frustrates those seeking clarity and transparency. Overuse of vague communication signals evasion and undermines credibility, as others begin questioning the speaker's intentions and reliability. False promises. Making commitments with no intention of fulfilling them manipulates expectations and builds false hope. For instance, promising a promotion or reward to motivate someone without planning to deliver fosters disillusionment when unmet. False promises exploit trust and enthusiasm, leaving recipients feeling betrayed and undervalued. They also damage relationships, as repeated broken pledges erode confidence in the promiser. Genuine agreements prioritize integrity and follow-through, ensuring mutual respect and long-term cooperation rather than short-term manipulation. Leading questions. Framing questions to guide someone toward a specific answer influences their thoughts and decisions subtly. For example, asking, "Don't you think this option is better?" implies bias and steers responses in a particular direction. Leading questions manipulate perspectives by narrowing options or suggesting preferred outcomes. While useful in certain contexts like sales or negotiations, they can feel coercive and dishonest when used excessively. Encouraging open-ended dialogue promotes fairness and ensures all viewpoints are considered equally. Blaming circumstances. Shifting responsibility onto external factors instead of owning up avoids accountability and perpetuates a victim mentality. For instance, blaming poor performance on lack of resources rather than personal effort deflects criticism but hinders growth. Blaming circumstances fosters dependency on excuses rather than solutions, preventing meaningful progress. It also strains relationships, as others grow weary of constant justifications. Taking ownership demonstrates maturity and resilience, paving the way for constructive change and earning respect from peers. Sleep deprivation. Keeping someone awake for extended periods weakens their mental defenses, making them more susceptible to manipulation or compliance. Sleep deprivation impairs cognitive functions such as decision-making, emotional regulation, and critical thinking. For example, interrogators or manipulators might use this tactic to break down resistance or extract concessions. The lack of rest amplifies stress and fatigue, leaving the individual vulnerable to irrational decisions or heightened suggestibility. While effective in achieving short-term goals, sleep deprivation is psychologically damaging and ethically questionable. Its use often backfires by creating resentment, mistrust, or long-term psychological harm, making it a risky and harmful tool in personal or professional dynamics. Monotony Breaker. Introducing sudden changes into an otherwise stable environment disrupts someone's sense of security and predictability. By altering routines or expectations without warning, the manipulator creates confusion and anxiety. For instance, switching between strict rules and lenient behavior keeps the target unsure of what to expect next. This unpredictability destabilizes their ability to adapt, forcing them to rely on the manipulator for guidance. Over time, this tactic erodes confidence and independence, fostering dependency. However, frequent disruptions can also breed frustration and resistance, as individuals may grow weary of constant instability and seek stability elsewhere. Overloading sensory input. Flooding someone with excessive stimuli overwhelms their ability to process information and maintain focus. Loud noises, bright lights, rapid-fire questions, or chaotic environments can induce sensory overload, leading to disorientation and fatigue. For example, bombarding someone with conflicting demands or information prevents them from forming coherent thoughts or strategies. This tactic exploits the brain's limited capacity to handle multiple inputs simultaneously, leaving the individual mentally exhausted and compliant. While overloading sensory input can achieve short-term control, it risks alienating the person and causing long-term stress or burnout, ultimately damaging relationships and trust. Unpredictability. Alternating between kindness and cruelty keeps someone perpetually off balance, unsure of how to respond or behave. For instance, offering warmth and support one moment, then lashing out harshly the next creates confusion and insecurity. This inconsistency undermines trust and forces the individual to constantly second-guess their actions to avoid triggering negative reactions. Unpredictability fosters dependency, as the victim becomes hyper-focused on pleasing the manipulator to mitigate potential backlash. However, this tactic often leads to emotional exhaustion and resentment, as the lack of consistency prevents healthy attachment or genuine connection from forming. Echo chamber creation. Surrounding someone with voices that reinforce a specific narrative shapes their perception of reality and limits exposure to dissenting opinions. For example, isolating them within groups that share the same beliefs ensures conformity and discourages critical thinking. Echo chambers create a false sense of validation, making individuals resistant to alternative viewpoints. Manipulators often use this tactic to solidify loyalty or justify questionable actions by presenting them as universally accepted truths. While echo chambers provide comfort through affirmation, they stifle intellectual growth and foster polarization, leaving individuals ill-equipped to engage with diverse perspectives or challenge misinformation. Selective honesty. Telling partial truths while omitting key details creates confusion and distrust. For instance, sharing accurate but incomplete information skews perceptions and misleads others into drawing incorrect conclusions. Selective honesty allows the manipulator to maintain plausible deniability while subtly influencing outcomes. It exploits the recipient's assumption of transparency, undermining their ability to discern the full picture. Over time, this tactic erodes credibility and damages relationships, as repeated omissions reveal intentional deception rather than genuine communication. Trust requires openness, making selective honesty a corrosive approach that prioritizes control over authenticity. Mind games. Posing riddles, puzzles, or complex challenges designed to frustrate and exhaust someone mentally serves as a form of psychological manipulation. These games test patience, logic, or problem-solving skills, often with no clear resolution or purpose. For example, presenting contradictory instructions or unsolvable tasks leaves the individual feeling inadequate or powerless. Mind games exploit vulnerabilities by highlighting perceived shortcomings, further eroding self-confidence. While these tactics can entertain or stimulate intellectually, they become harmful when used to demean or dominate others. Recognizing mind games helps prevent emotional exploitation and promotes healthier interactions based on mutual respect. Paranoia Induction. Dropping cryptic hints or ambiguous statements makes someone suspicious of those around them, fostering paranoia. For instance, suggesting hidden motives or secret alliances without providing evidence plants seeds of doubt. This tactic isolates individuals by eroding trust in friends, family, or colleagues, leaving them dependent on the manipulator for reassurance. Paranoia induction thrives on uncertainty, amplifying insecurities and fear of betrayal. Over time, it distorts reality and damages relationships, as victims struggle to differentiate truth from fabrication. Encouraging open communication and transparency counters this harmful strategy, restoring clarity and trust. Identity erosion. Undermining someone's self-worth by attacking their core beliefs, values, or identity strips away their sense of purpose and confidence. For example, dismissing their passions, ridiculing their principles, or invalidating their achievements diminishes their self-esteem. Identity erosion aims to replace personal convictions with dependence on the manipulator's worldview. Victims may feel lost or disconnected from their authentic selves, struggling to reclaim autonomy. This tactic is deeply damaging, as it targets foundational aspects of who someone is. Building resilience and seeking supportive communities counteracts identity erosion, empowering individuals to reaffirm their worth and regain agency. Social rejection. Deliberately excluding someone from social interactions or groups induces feelings of isolation and desperation for acceptance. For instance, ignoring them during conversations or organizing events without inviting them signals exclusion. Social rejection exploits the innate human need for belonging, pressuring individuals to conform or seek approval. Over time, it fosters anxiety, low self-esteem, and compliance with unreasonable demands. While effective in manipulating behavior, social rejection harms mental health and damages relationships, creating resentment rather than genuine connection. Promoting inclusivity and empathy counters this tactic, fostering environments where everyone feels valued and respected. Stockholm Syndrome Setup. Creating dependency through alternating punishment and reward manipulates emotions to foster loyalty, even in unhealthy dynamics. For instance, a manipulator might isolate someone, then offer affection or relief intermittently, making the victim associate safety with their presence. This cycle of abuse exploits psychological needs, conditioning the individual to rely on their abuser for validation or protection. Over time, it erodes autonomy and reinforces power imbalances, leaving the victim emotionally trapped. While this tactic ensures compliance, it is deeply harmful, perpetuating cycles of trauma and dependency. Recognizing these patterns helps victims seek support and break free from toxic relationships. Cognitive dissonance. Forcing someone to reconcile conflicting beliefs or behaviors creates mental discomfort, making them vulnerable to manipulation. For example, insisting they hold opposing values, such as claiming loyalty while acting selfishly, forces internal conflict. Manipulators exploit this tension by pressuring individuals to justify irrational actions or adopt new beliefs that align with the manipulator's agenda. Cognitive dissonance disrupts critical thinking, fostering confusion and self-doubt. Prolonged exposure can lead to emotional distress, as individuals struggle to resolve inconsistencies. Encouraging reflection and seeking external perspectives helps counteract this destabilizing tactic. Hoovering. Reappearing after disappearing reignites unresolved emotions, drawing someone back into a toxic relationship. The manipulator often uses nostalgia, false promises, or fabricated urgency to regain control. For example, saying, "I miss you," or reminiscing about shared memories taps into lingering attachment or hope for change. Hoovering exploits vulnerability, especially if the individual still harbors feelings or doubts about ending the relationship. While it temporarily restores connection, this tactic perpetuates cycles of abuse and emotional manipulation. Setting firm boundaries and prioritizing self-care protects against falling prey to hoovering attempts. Smear campaigns. Spreading false rumors damages reputations and isolates individuals from their support systems. By portraying the target as untrustworthy, immoral, or incompetent, the manipulator undermines credibility and fosters mistrust. For example, labeling someone as crazy or unreliable shifts public perception, creating divisions and silencing dissent. Smear campaigns thrive on fear and gossip, leaving victims struggling to defend themselves against baseless accusations. Emotional distress and damaged relationships often follow. Countering smear tactics requires rallying trusted allies, advocating for transparency, and restoring truth to reclaim integrity and trust. Intimidation through silence. Responding to arguments with stony silence unnerves the other person, amplifying tension and uncertainty. Silent treatment forces the recipient to question their actions or words, seeking resolution where none seems possible. For instance, refusing to engage during heated discussions leaves the other party feeling powerless and anxious. This tactic exploits the human need for communication, using absence as a weapon to assert dominance. While effective in controlling interactions, intimidation through silence damages trust and fosters resentment, as it avoids addressing issues constructively and perpetuates emotional manipulation. Subtle threats. Implied danger, without explicit statements, instills fear and compliance by leveraging ambiguity. For example, mentioning potential consequences like accidents happen or hinting at hidden risks keeps others on edge. Subtle threats exploit imagination, allowing recipients to fill in gaps with worst-case scenarios. This tactic avoids direct confrontation while maintaining psychological pressure, ensuring submission without clear evidence of wrongdoing. However, reliance on implied threats erodes trust and creates an atmosphere of paranoia. Open dialogue and accountability counteract this manipulative strategy, fostering environments where fear does not dictate behavior. Sabotage. Secretly hindering someone's efforts ensures their failure, reinforcing dependence or diminishing confidence. For instance, withholding crucial information, tampering with resources, or spreading doubt sabotages progress and achievement. Sabotage operates covertly, leaving the victim unaware of deliberate interference until it's too late. This tactic undermines autonomy and fosters frustration, making the individual question their abilities. Often used in competitive or abusive dynamics, sabotage damages morale and relationships. Recognizing sabotage empowers individuals to seek support, document patterns, and address underlying conflicts to prevent further harm. False hope. Leading someone to believe improvement is imminent when you know otherwise manipulates their expectations and prolongs suffering. For example, promising solutions or better circumstances without follow-through keeps the individual invested in futile efforts. False hope exploits optimism, delaying acceptance of reality and preventing meaningful action. Over time, shattered expectations lead to disillusionment and emotional exhaustion. While false hope temporarily maintains loyalty or compliance, it ultimately erodes trust and resilience. Providing honest assessments and realistic guidance fosters empowerment, enabling individuals to navigate challenges authentically. Discrediting. Attacking someone's credibility undermines their authority and diminishes their influence. For example, questioning expertise, exaggerating mistakes, or highlighting past failures casts doubt on their reliability. Discrediting seeks to delegitimize voices that challenge the manipulator's narrative, silencing dissent. This tactic thrives on public perception, leveraging biases to sway opinions and isolate the target. Victims often struggle to regain trust and respect once discredited. Promoting transparency, fact-checking claims, and advocating for fairness counters this harmful strategy, restoring dignity and validating contributions. Exploiting weaknesses. Identifying vulnerabilities such as insecurities, fears, or past traumas and using them against someone demonstrates calculated cruelty. For instance, mocking personal flaws or leveraging sensitive history manipulates emotions and weakens defenses. Exploiting weaknesses reinforces power imbalances, ensuring compliance through shame or fear. This tactic devastates self-esteem and fosters dependency, leaving victims feeling exposed and defenseless. Over time, repeated exploitation causes lasting psychological harm. Cultivating empathy, building resilience, and establishing boundaries mitigate its effects, empowering individuals to reclaim agency and heal from manipulation. Mimicking disorders. Faking symptoms of mental illness to gain sympathy or avoid consequences is a deeply manipulative tactic. For example, pretending to experience anxiety attacks or depression can elicit compassion from others, excusing harmful behavior or evading accountability. This exploitation of trust undermines genuine struggles with mental health, creating skepticism and doubt about legitimate cases. Over time, mimicking disorders erodes relationships, as people may feel betrayed upon discovering the deception. It also shifts focus away from addressing real issues, fostering resentment and confusion. While it might provide short-term benefits, this tactic damages credibility and strains emotional connections, leaving lasting scars on both parties involved. Parentification. Treating a child like a parent figure burdens them emotionally and disrupts their development. For instance, confiding in them about adult problems or relying on them for emotional support reverses roles, forcing maturity before they're ready. Parentification exploits the child's desire to help, often leaving them overwhelmed and neglecting their own needs. This dynamic fosters guilt and responsibility beyond their capacity, leading to long-term emotional struggles. By prioritizing the caregiver's needs over the child's well-being, parentification stunts personal growth and creates imbalances in future relationships. Encouraging healthy boundaries and seeking professional guidance helps mitigate its harmful effects. Emotional rollercoaster. Alternating between extreme highs and lows destabilizes someone by keeping them perpetually off balance. For example, showering affection one moment and withdrawing it the next creates uncertainty and dependency. This tactic exploits the victim's need for stability, forcing them to constantly adjust to unpredictable shifts in mood or behavior. Over time, the emotional whiplash erodes confidence and self-worth, leaving them desperate to regain control. Emotional rollercoasters manipulate attachment, making the individual question their perceptions and cling to fleeting moments of positivity. Recognizing these patterns restores clarity and empowers individuals to seek healthier, more consistent relationships. Controlled chaos. Intentionally creating disorder asserts dominance by overwhelming others and disrupting their sense of security. For example, changing plans abruptly, spreading misinformation, or introducing unnecessary complications forces others to rely on the manipulator for guidance. Controlled chaos exploits confusion, ensuring compliance through dependency. This tactic undermines autonomy, leaving victims feeling powerless and disoriented. Over time, it fosters frustration and mistrust, as repeated disruptions strain relationships and hinder progress. Restoring order requires identifying the source of chaos and establishing clear boundaries to prevent further manipulation. Breaking boundaries. Testing limits repeatedly until someone gives in entirely exploits patience and resilience. For instance, pushing boundaries, whether physical, emotional, or ethical, conditions the individual to tolerate increasingly unacceptable behavior. Each incremental breach weakens resistance, normalizing disrespect or harm over time. Breaking boundaries reinforces power imbalances, leaving victims feeling trapped and voiceless. This tactic disregards consent and mutual respect, prioritizing control over connection. Recognizing and enforcing personal limits protects against boundary violations, fostering healthier interactions based on equality and understanding. Rewriting history. Denying events occurred differently than they did distorts reality and gaslights the victim into questioning their memory. For example, insisting a conversation never happened or misrepresenting past actions erases accountability and fosters confusion. Rewriting history exploits vulnerability, undermining trust in one's perception of truth. Over time, this tactic destabilizes confidence and self-trust, leaving individuals dependent on the manipulator's version of events. Countering this manipulation involves documenting interactions, seeking external validation, and asserting reality to reclaim clarity and agency. Projection of insecurity. Convincing someone they are paranoid or irrational when questioning motives deflects scrutiny and reinforces dependence. For example, dismissing valid concerns as overthinking invalidates their perspective and silences dissent. Projection of insecurity exploits fear of judgment, fostering self-doubt and compliance. Victims may suppress instincts to avoid conflict, enabling further manipulation. Over time, this tactic erodes autonomy and critical thinking. Encouraging open dialogue and trusting intuition counteracts this harmful strategy, empowering individuals to challenge falsehoods and assert their truth. Public humiliation. Embarrassing someone publicly asserts dominance by diminishing their dignity in front of others. For example, mocking mistakes or exposing private information fosters shame and isolation. Public humiliation exploits vulnerability, leveraging social pressure to enforce submission. This tactic damages self-esteem and relationships, creating lasting emotional scars. Victims often struggle to regain confidence and trust after such overt cruelty. Addressing public humiliation requires confronting the perpetrator, rallying support, and promoting kindness to restore respect and inclusion. Forced gratitude. Demanding thanks for basic decency manipulates emotions by instilling guilt for unmet expectations. For example, saying, "You should be grateful I even helped you," implies ingratitude if appreciation isn't expressed adequately. Forced gratitude exploits obligation, fostering resentment rather than genuine connection. This tactic diminishes acts of kindness by attaching strings to altruism. Over time, it strains relationships, leaving recipients feeling undervalued and burdened. Authentic gratitude arises naturally, fostering mutual respect ensures meaningful exchanges without coercion. Conditional affection. Showing love only when specific conditions are met manipulates attachment by linking affection to performance. For example, withholding praise or attention until tasks are completed fosters insecurity and desperation for approval. Conditional affection exploits emotional needs, prioritizing control over genuine care. This dynamic undermines self-worth, leaving individuals reliant on external validation. Over time, it damages trust and intimacy, replacing authentic connection with transactional relationships. Cultivating unconditional support promotes emotional security and strengthens bonds based on mutual respect. Stalking without stalking. Monitoring someone online to learn intimate details about their life is a covert form of surveillance that invades privacy without physical presence. By tracking social media activity, location tags, or public posts, the manipulator gathers information to exploit vulnerabilities or anticipate behaviors. This digital intrusion creates an unsettling imbalance of power, as the victim remains unaware of being watched. For example, using shared photos or check-ins to show up unexpectedly amplifies feelings of unease and control. While this tactic avoids direct confrontation, it fosters paranoia and mistrust, leaving the individual feeling exposed and violated. Recognizing such monitoring requires vigilance and proactive measures like adjusting privacy settings to protect personal boundaries. Digital gaslighting. Altering digital evidence, such as editing photos, deleting messages, or fabricating screenshots, distorts reality and undermines trust in one's perception. For instance, claiming a conversation never happened by erasing chat histories forces the victim to question their memory. Digital gaslighting exploits reliance on technology for truth, creating confusion and self-doubt. Over time, this manipulation destabilizes confidence and fosters dependence on the perpetrator's narrative. Victims may feel powerless when faced with fabricated proof. Addressing digital gaslighting involves documenting interactions independently and seeking external validation to counteract deceptive tactics and restore clarity. Puppet master role. Pulling strings behind the scenes to orchestrate outcomes without detection demonstrates calculated manipulation. By influencing decisions through intermediaries or subtle nudges, the puppet master ensures they remain unseen while controlling events. For example, planting ideas in others' minds or arranging circumstances to align with their agenda reinforces dominance. This tactic thrives on secrecy, making it difficult for victims to identify the source of influence. Puppet masters exploit trust and autonomy, leaving individuals unaware of how their actions are being directed. Recognizing hidden agendas restores agency and empowers individuals to resist covert control. Emotional hijacking. Triggering intense emotions clouds judgment and impairs rational decision-making. For instance, provoking anger, fear, or guilt forces someone to react impulsively rather than thoughtfully. Emotional hijacking exploits vulnerability, prioritizing immediate compliance over long-term understanding. This tactic undermines emotional regulation, leaving victims feeling overwhelmed and disoriented. Over time, repeated manipulation erodes resilience and self-trust. Cultivating emotional awareness and practicing mindfulness helps counteract emotional hijacking, enabling individuals to respond calmly and assertively instead of succumbing to reactive impulses. Manipulative gifts. Giving presents with strings attached ties affection or gratitude to specific conditions, fostering obligation rather than genuine connection. For example, offering expensive gifts only to later demand favors distorts reciprocity into coercion. Manipulative gifts exploit generosity, making recipients feel indebted and pressured to comply. This dynamic undermines authenticity, replacing mutual care with transactional exchanges. Over time, it breeds resentment and damages relationships. Encouraging unconditional giving promotes meaningful bonds based on sincerity rather than ulterior motives. Faux friendship. Pretending to befriend someone to gather intel or exploit them later masks manipulation under the guise of camaraderie. For instance, building rapport solely to gain access to sensitive information or resources fosters mistrust once intentions are revealed. Faux friendship exploits vulnerability, leveraging kindness to extract benefits at the expense of genuine connection. Victims often feel betrayed and isolated upon discovering deceit. Nurturing authentic friendships built on transparency and mutual respect counters this harmful tactic, fostering environments where trust can thrive without hidden agendas. Proxy abuse. Using intermediaries to carry out harmful actions indirectly shields the manipulator from accountability while inflicting damage. For example, enlisting others to spread rumors, deliver threats, or sabotage efforts distances the perpetrator from blame. Proxy abuse exploits loyalty or ignorance, weaponizing third parties against the target. This tactic amplifies harm by involving multiple layers of betrayal and confusion. Victims struggle to identify the true source of aggression, complicating resolution. Addressing proxy abuse requires confronting orchestrators directly and holding accomplices accountable to dismantle these destructive networks. Dream invasion. Discussing someone's dreams delves into subconscious thoughts, exposing deeply personal fears, desires, or insecurities. For instance, analyzing dream symbolism to interpret unresolved issues provides insight but also risks exploitation if used manipulatively. Dream invasion blurs boundaries, invading private mental spaces under the pretense of curiosity or support. Over time, this intrusion fosters discomfort and mistrust, as individuals feel exposed even in their most vulnerable states. Respecting emotional limits and refraining from prying protects psychological safety and preserves trust. Memory implantation. Suggesting false memories alters someone's perception of the past, creating doubt and confusion. For example, repeatedly describing fabricated events as real plants seeds of belief, leading the individual to internalize fictional narratives. Memory implantation exploits cognitive biases, prioritizing suggestion over objective truth. This tactic undermines confidence and self-trust, leaving victims questioning their experiences. Over time, distorted memories distort identity and relationships. Encouraging critical reflection and corroborating accounts with trusted sources counters this insidious form of manipulation. Phantom communication. Sending vague messages that imply knowledge of private matters instills unease and paranoia. For example, cryptic phrases like "I know what you did" or references to undisclosed secrets suggest surveillance or hidden agendas. Phantom communication exploits imagination, leaving recipients anxious about potential exposure. This tactic fosters insecurity and mistrust, as individuals scramble to decipher meaning or confront perceived threats. Clarifying intentions and maintaining transparency restores clarity, preventing unnecessary distress caused by ambiguous interactions. Mirror talking. Repeating everything someone says, word for word, is a disorienting tactic designed to irritate and destabilize. For instance, mimicking their tone, pace, or phrasing creates an unsettling echo effect that disrupts normal conversation flow. This mind game exploits the discomfort of being imitated, forcing the individual to question whether they are being mocked or tested. Over time, mirror talking can erode confidence in communication, making the victim feel ridiculed or invalidated. While it might seem childish, this tactic undermines emotional stability by creating tension and confusion. Recognizing mirror talking as a deliberate act helps individuals maintain composure and assert boundaries, preventing further manipulation. Invisible strings. Controlling situations remotely without direct involvement allows manipulators to orchestrate outcomes while remaining undetected. For example, subtly influencing decisions through intermediaries or planting ideas ensures the manipulator avoids accountability. Invisible strings thrive on secrecy, leaving victims unaware of how their actions are being directed. This tactic fosters dependency, as individuals unknowingly align with the manipulator's agenda. Over time, invisible control breeds mistrust and frustration, as patterns emerge but lack clear origins. Identifying hidden influences restores agency, empowering individuals to challenge covert manipulation and reclaim autonomy. Time distortion. Messing with someone's perception of time confuses and destabilizes their sense of reality. For instance, deliberately delaying responses, altering schedules, or creating false urgency distorts temporal awareness. A manipulator might say, "I told you days ago," when no such interaction occurred, sowing doubt about memory or timing. Time distortion exploits cognitive biases, leaving victims questioning their grasp of events. This tactic undermines trust in one's perception, fostering anxiety and uncertainty. Overcoming time distortion requires documenting interactions and relying on external validation to counteract deceptive tactics. Ghosting. Vanishing from someone's life without explanation leaves them questioning what went wrong. For example, abruptly cutting off communication, ignoring calls, texts, or social media creates silence that amplifies insecurity and self-doubt. Ghosting exploits the human need for closure, leaving victims obsessing over unresolved issues. This tactic inflicts emotional pain by rejecting connection without justification. Over time, ghosting damages trust and fosters fear of abandonment. Addressing ghosting involves acknowledging its impact and seeking clarity to heal and move forward. False allies. Pretending to side with someone against a common enemy only to betray them later exploits trust for personal gain. For instance, offering support or solidarity initially fosters collaboration, but the eventual betrayal leaves the victim blindsided and vulnerable. False allies manipulate loyalty, using temporary alliances to gather information or resources before turning on the target. This tactic undermines relationships, fostering paranoia and mistrust. Recognizing false alliances requires skepticism and vigilance, ensuring genuine partnerships are built on transparency rather than deception. Emotional vampirism. Draining someone's energy by constantly dumping negativity on them exploits empathy and compassion. For example, complaining incessantly, exaggerating problems, or playing the victim forces the listener into a caregiving role. Emotional vampirism thrives on attention, leaving the victim emotionally exhausted and depleted. Over time, this dynamic fosters resentment and imbalance, as the giver feels unappreciated or overwhelmed. Setting boundaries and prioritizing self-care protects against emotional exploitation, restoring equilibrium to relationships. Dopamine hijack. Using addictive behaviors or substances to control someone exploits the brain's reward system. For instance, encouraging excessive gaming, shopping, or substance use creates dependency, ensuring compliance through pleasure-seeking habits. Dopamine hijacking manipulates motivation, replacing intrinsic goals with artificial rewards. This tactic undermines autonomy, leaving victims trapped in cycles of addiction. Overcoming dopamine hijacking requires breaking free from triggers and fostering healthier habits that prioritize long-term well-being over short-term gratification. Reality shifting. Convincing someone their version of reality is wrong distorts perception and fosters confusion. For example, denying facts, altering details, or dismissing evidence invalidates the victim's understanding of events. Reality shifting exploits vulnerability, leaving individuals questioning their sanity or judgment. This tactic undermines self-trust, making victims reliant on the manipulator's narrative. Countering reality shifting involves documenting interactions and seeking external validation to reaffirm truth and restore clarity. Subliminal messaging. Embedding hidden cues in communication subtly influences thoughts and behaviors. For instance, incorporating suggestive language, imagery, or sounds bypasses conscious awareness, shaping perceptions unconsciously. Subliminal messaging exploits subconscious processing, creating subtle shifts in attitudes or beliefs. While often used in marketing, this tactic risks manipulation if employed deceitfully. Recognizing subliminal messaging fosters critical thinking, enabling individuals to resist covert influence and make informed decisions. Hypnotic suggestions. Using repetitive phrases or patterns implants ideas in someone's subconscious, shaping their thoughts or actions. For example, consistently reinforcing specific beliefs or behaviors during relaxed states bypasses critical thinking. Hypnotic suggestions exploit suggestibility, fostering compliance without conscious resistance. This tactic undermines autonomy, leaving victims unaware of its influence. Addressing hypnotic suggestions involves cultivating mindfulness and questioning ingrained beliefs to counteract unintentional programming. Predatory patience. Waiting years to exact revenge or achieve a goal demonstrates calculated ruthlessness. This chilling tactic involves biding time, observing, and planning until the perfect moment to strike arises. For instance, a manipulator might quietly gather information or resources over decades, ensuring their actions have maximum impact when executed. Predatory patience exploits the element of surprise, leaving victims blindsided by seemingly sudden attacks rooted in long-forgotten grievances. The prolonged anticipation also serves as psychological torment for both parties, one consumed by vengeance, the other unaware of impending harm. While this method ensures precision, it reflects an obsessive focus on control that can destroy relationships irreparably. Identity theft. Assuming someone's identity to ruin their life or steal opportunities is a deeply invasive act with devastating consequences. By impersonating another person, whether through forged documents, hacked accounts, or stolen credentials, the perpetrator wreaks havoc on finances, reputations, and personal relationships. For example, taking out loans or committing crimes under the victim's name leaves them grappling with legal battles and ruined credit scores. Identity theft not only shatters trust but also forces victims into a relentless fight to reclaim their sense of self. The violation extends beyond material losses, inflicting emotional trauma and paranoia about future security breaches. Psychological torture. Systematic methods designed to break down someone's psyche are among the most insidious forms of manipulation. Techniques like sleep deprivation, sensory overload, isolation, or relentless criticism wear away at mental resilience. For instance, repeatedly gaslighting or subjecting someone to unpredictable cruelty fosters confusion, fear, and helplessness. Psychological torture aims to dismantle autonomy, replacing confidence with dependency on the abuser. Over time, victims may lose touch with reality or develop severe anxiety, depression, or PTSD. This deliberate erosion of well-being leaves lasting scars, making recovery a painstaking process requiring professional intervention and support. Existential crisis induction. Questioning someone's purpose in life destabilizes their worldview, plunging them into existential despair. For example, repeatedly asking, "What's the point of anything you do?" undermines motivation and self-worth. This tactic exploits philosophical uncertainties, amplifying feelings of insignificance or futility. Existential crisis induction targets foundational beliefs, leaving individuals questioning their values, goals, and identity. Manipulators use this technique to assert dominance or provoke surrender, often pushing victims toward apathy or self-destructive behaviors. Addressing such crises requires reconnecting with meaning, fostering resilience, and seeking guidance to rebuild a coherent sense of purpose. False prophet role. Posing as a spiritual leader to exploit followers leverages faith for personal gain. For instance, claiming divine authority or special insight allows manipulators to demand obedience, money, or loyalty while punishing dissent. False prophets thrive on charisma and vulnerability, preying on those seeking guidance or salvation. Their teachings often contradict established doctrines, creating cult-like environments where critical thinking is discouraged. Followers may face guilt, shame, or ostracism if they question the leader's motives. Exposing false prophets involves education, community vigilance, and encouraging independent thought to protect against exploitation disguised as spirituality. Life scripting. Dictating major life choices under the guise of guidance strips individuals of agency, imposing rigid expectations. For example, parents or partners might insist on specific careers, relationships, or lifestyles, dismissing personal desires as irrelevant. Life scripting exploits trust and authority, framing control as care or protection. Over time, victims internalize these narratives, losing sight of their own aspirations. This tactic stifles individuality and breeds resentment, leaving people trapped in lives misaligned with their true selves. Breaking free requires recognizing imposed scripts, asserting boundaries, and pursuing authentic paths despite external pressures. Eternal guilt loop. Reminding someone endlessly of past mistakes keeps them trapped in a cycle of shame and submission. For example, bringing up failures during arguments or decision-making moments reinforces inadequacy and dependence. Eternal guilt loops exploit regret, preventing growth or self-forgiveness. Victims become hyper-focused on earning approval, sacrificing autonomy to appease the manipulator. Over time, this dynamic erodes self-esteem and perpetuates power imbalances. Healing involves acknowledging imperfections without letting them define worth, setting boundaries, and fostering supportive relationships that prioritize accountability over punishment. Suicide baiting. Subtly encouraging suicidal ideation in vulnerable individuals is a horrifying form of manipulation. For instance, suggesting life isn't worth living or reinforcing hopelessness amplifies despair. Suicide baiting exploits fragility, pushing individuals toward irreversible decisions while absolving the manipulator of direct responsibility. This tactic reflects callous disregard for human life, prioritizing cruelty over compassion. Intervening requires recognizing warning signs, offering empathy, and connecting victims with mental health resources to counteract destructive influences. Prevention hinges on fostering safe spaces where struggles are met with understanding rather than exploitation. Mind wipe. Erasing all traces of your existence from someone's life inflicts profound emotional devastation. For example, deleting shared memories, cutting off contact, or destroying mutual belongings creates a void where connection once thrived. Mind wipe exploits attachment, leaving victims grappling with loss and questioning reality. This tactic mirrors ghosting but escalates its severity by systematically removing evidence of the relationship. It fosters isolation and confusion, making healing nearly impossible without acknowledgement or closure. Rebuilding after a mind wipe involves processing grief, reaffirming self-worth, and cultivating new connections built on transparency and reciprocity. Total domination. Completely stripping someone of autonomy and free will represents the pinnacle of psychological manipulation. For example, controlling every aspect of their daily life, choices, movements, thoughts ensures absolute dependence on the manipulator. Total domination exploits fear, isolation, and systematic degradation to enforce compliance. Victims often feel trapped, powerless, and devoid of identity. This extreme level of control reflects pathological neediness or sadism, prioritizing dominance over humanity. Escaping total domination demands external intervention, legal protections, and extensive therapeutic recovery to restore agency, dignity, and independence.